Hi, I'm Paul McCormack, artist from New York. Probably best known for my portraits in watercolor, my portraits in oil. I'm here today. I've been demonstrating a new palette that's being produced by Jerry's, and I'm demonstrating with our model Meredith. I did a quick drawing on watercolor paper. I'm working on Arch's 140-pound cold press. I just finished testing my colors on a separate piece of paper. Okay, my light, my halftone, and dark. That's the reason for the 9 mix-and wells in this palette. And now I'm ready to apply them to the painting. So the first technique that I'll be showing you is wet into wet. And you use wet into wet whenever you want all your edges soft-edged. Okay, so working with clear water. Also note in the drawing, in my line drawing, I've indicated my shadow planes. I've indicated the exact placement of my highlights. And that's about all you need, you know, with the features and whatnot and all that other stuff. But make sure you have those shadow planes and those highlights indicated. Okay, so now we're going to wet the face inside the hairline with clean water. You could bleed a little bit into the hairline. And work around the eyes. Now you probably also noticed that I'm working upright. Most watercolorists work flat. I've been doing this for a very long time. In all the years of teaching and doing demos, I just got in the habit of working upright, and now I literally cannot work with the painting laying down flat on a table. Okay, I'm also wetting around the mouth, and also I am wetting around any highlights that we want to keep hard-edged. For example, the highlight on the tip of the nose. Any highlights that we want to keep soft-edged, we just wet over. Okay, and you could use the glare of the light to see if you're covering everything fairly evenly. Almost there. I'm just putting a little more water on it, just as I did in the first attempt. By saturating it twice, it should give you just a little bit more time to work wet into wet, maybe about another 5 seconds. Okay, now we're going to start with my light mixture. And if you've seen the previous video, my basic flesh palette is yellow ochre, rose madder, genuine, and cerulean blue. Just different combinations of the same 3 colors in each of the wells. Now this is the color of my light source. And this is pretty much just a flat wash. You're not doing any modeling. You're working around some of those soft-edged highlights. You have to work very quick. You're probably looking at it and say, why is he painting her face purple? Well, you'll soon see. Okay, now we go into the local color. And you can see this is a lot warmer. And it will be neutralized slightly by the violet. Now I'm going to work around my soft edge highlights. Again, remember you have to work very quickly. And you don't want to play with the paint. Just lay it on and let it do what it wants to do. If you start playing with it, you're just going to make a mess. You're going to get watermarks and blooms and all kinds of nasty little things. Now over the shadowed side, it's pretty much just a flat wash. Work around that subtle highlight on the chin. We have a little hair there from the brush. That's not good, but I'll take a dry brush and try and lift that out. And it's being stubborn, really stubborn. You know what? We'll just leave it. If it leaves a mark, well, that'll be another demo. I'll show you how to get rid of it. Okay, now, while this is still wet, we're going to go into our shadow. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this in this video, but if you're working with the cerulean, make sure you mix it thoroughly before you hit that paper because it separates. And your wash will come out very grainy. Okay, we're going to lay in our shadow. Also note, when I pick up that shadow color, or when I'm working to wet in the wet, I'm always hitting the paper towel, taking some of the water out. Less moisture, less water, more control. Now remember, we are working about 2 to 3 values lighter than the actual subject, leaving room for subsequent glazes and washes. Now my wash bled out just a little too far over here, so I'm just going to take a dry brush, clean that up a little bit. I'm going to switch to a slightly smaller brush. Come down to the neck. We have that cast shadow. Okay, so this is a basic block-in, okay? We're going to take the blow dryer, we're going to dry this, and then we're going to start glazing all the subtle colors that we see in the face. We're going to glaze in the reds and the violets and the greens. That's the thing that's going to make this face look, you know, the flesh look luminous and alive. All right, so we'll be right back. I'm going to take the hair dryer and dry this up, and then we'll continue. Okay, well, our initial washes are nice and dry, okay? And what we're going to do now is we're going to start glazing in some of the subtle colors, as I said before. We are going to start with the reds. The reds are the easiest. You see them wherever the flesh is, you know, closer to cartilage or bone. Cheekbones, the brow, the forehead here, chin, cartilage in those ears, or cartilage. That's where you find most of the reds. So now I'm going to introduce a little bit of cadmium red. I'm going to use these 3 wells here, again in the upper corners. A little cadmium red, a little rose madder genuine, and with those 2 colors in very clean water, we want to mix the right temperature of the red and the pinks that we see in the face. And if we recall, we have our testing ground. Now these are going to be very subtle color changes. And you could simply test it, look at your model, and you could say it needs to be warmer, it needs to be cooler. Value-wise, it looks okay. So let's put those in first. Just mixing up a little more. Okay. Now I'm going to be working wet onto dry. Working wet onto dry could be a bit tricky, but it gives you the most control. For example, let me take some of this local flesh color, and I'll show you what I mean. You want to be able to lay a wash, wet onto dry, you come back, pigment out of the brush, on the paper towel, take some of the moisture out, and you come back and hit that wash, and you soften the edge. But the trick is, if the brush is too wet, it's going to backwash into your wash, leave a bloom, leave a watermark, and if the brush isn't wet enough, you're not going to soften the edge and you end up with hard edge. It looks very simple, but trust me, it's a bit tricky, but with a little bit of practice, you'll have complete control of your washes. So let's apply that red. I am going to start with the cheek. And I put these subtle color changes on very early because there are certain colors you won't be able to get later on if the flesh gets too dark. For example, your pinks won't look pink, they'll start to look ruddy and brown. But if you get them on soon enough, they'll stay red. And you could take the same mixture, go to the other cheekbone, glaze it on, pigment out of the brush, come back, soften the edges. A little bit on the brow here. Come back, soften the edge. A little bit down the bridge of the nose. Those edges I'm going to leave hard. Hard edges will pull things forward, okay? So I'm going to leave the highlight and a lot of the paint strokes on the nose a bit harder, which in turn, when the painting's done, it'll bring the nose forward. A little bit on the chin. Okay, so I would continue in this fashion through the rest, with the red. The other color that we're going to put in is our green. And again, I'm using the yellow ochre and the cerulean blue. I'm not introducing a different green, okay? The only other color that I introduce in the flesh is the cad red because you need that warmer red. So I'm making my green with the yellow ochre and the cerulean blue. If you keep your palette limited, less of a chance to actually make mud. And again, with the yellow and the cerulean, you can mix the right temperature of green, warm or cool. Now the greens are very subtle. They're leaning more towards a blue-green. And the cooler colors are just the opposite. You find them in the hollows of the face. You'll find them underneath the bag of the eye in this area right here. The lower half of the face is the most common one, which is always much cooler. And again, we can test them before we actually apply them. You could test them over the local color, you could test them over the shadow. You look at the model, and maybe just a little more blue. And that should be pretty good. And you should always be looking at your model. You don't want to do a nice tight line drawing and just fill it in like a paint by numbers. Because you'll find as you paint, you'll be changing subtleties in the drawing itself. Or I should say the modeling of the head. Now, I don't know if you could actually see the subtle changes that I'm putting in. But trust me, they're there. Okay. Again, I would continue in that fashion. All right, I'm going to dry this just real quick. It'll only take a minute, so if you don't mind the noise of the blow dryer just for a second. Okay, so normally I would probably mix up my violets and put in a few subtle violets and, you know, some other colors and build it up slowly. But I'm going to jump right to the next step with the flesh so you have a better understanding how to utilize this palette. Now, the nice thing about this palette is you take all that time to mix up your light, your halftone, and your dark, or, you know, your 3 colors, or really any color. And then you come back the next day, they're still going to be here in your well. So you simply just re-wet the color and you can proceed as you were working the day before. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to work wet onto dry. I'm going to make these lights pop out a little bit more. I'm going to go back to my local color, work wet onto dry, and I'm just testing on the side just so I could see the value. You could test on your testing ground or on the side, whatever you're more comfortable with. Now we have bright highlight here, we have a highlight here on the brow, we got some brighter lights here that need to pop out, which means everything has to go a little bit darker. Now the trick to work in this fashion, and you want to soften your edges, is never to leave a dry edge behind you. So I'm looking at all these subtle lights in the face, working around them, softening the edges. But as you can see, you have to work very rapidly. You know, and if one of your edges don't come out exactly the way you want it, don't worry about it. Don't sit there and fuss with it, because as I said earlier, the more you fuss, you're just going to make more of a mess. Okay, so this is pretty much how I would continue with the face, but I would probably stop here. My next step is really to eliminate the white of the paper. So in this section here, I would mix up the hair color, washing the hair in the same fashion, working wet into wet, and then working wet into dry. Then I would have my flesh, I would have my subtle color changes in the flesh, I would have my hair color, and pretty much I would have everything needed to paint a portrait in watercolor. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little demo, and I hope you enjoyed the little instruction on the palette itself, and I hope you pick one up. There will be a little instruction booklet included with this, and I hope you enjoy it. And again, I'm Paul McCormack, and please visit my website at mccormackstudios.com.